Hey, welcome back. We're continuing with lesson 7. Slightly different view from last time. Not the pretty boats going in and out of the harbor down in Galilee, but we're up in Warwick, Rhode Island, and it's a rainy day. And well, so be it. That's the way it is. Let's embrace what is. I noticed kind of a heavy, gucky energy today, and it's a little dark, and cold weather's coming. And I just want to say yuck. And I'm reminded of the beautiful practice. Oh, right, Dave, turn attention towards loving and embracing what is, feeling what's occurring, instead of resisting it. So wherever you are, hopefully it's a sunny day in Maui or whatever it is that you're enjoying. Or a sunny day inside you, more importantly. A sunny day in me, or something along those lines. Just invite you to bring attention to whatever's arising for you now in this moment. We can think in terms of feeling states. Joy, anger, sadness, fear. What am I feeling? As the mind gets more disciplined in this relationship with feeling communion, we filter out the thoughts that we're calling feelings, like, oh, I feel that, the government shouldn't be so intrusive or something. That's a thought. It might be associated with a feeling follows that thought, but the thought itself isn't the feeling. So we stay more vigilant with, oh yeah, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling joyful, or I'm feeling whatever it is, sad, afraid. Those four, basically, multiple choice. Most of the time it comes down to those. They're like the primary colors of emotional states. And when you're going through an emotional process, I think it's really helpful to have multiple choice instead of an essay question, if you know what I mean. Josh was hitting on something in lesson 7 last time that I think is really worth looking at. He starts focusing on love of self. He uses a capital S for self. I've had this idea over time that maybe the way the universe works, particularly as we're talking about desire and inner desire, heart's desire, Joshua is really talking about to us as if we are individuals, each who have certain access to the desires of that individual that we are. It sort of makes perfect sense. But something that people might not have put together is, well, if we have awareness of the feeling states, the desires, hopes, dreams, fears, whatever it is, of one individual more than any other in the whole universe, of course that would be ourselves, might it be that our number one job that God has given us is to love that being, ourselves? That self-love is our greatest responsibility. It would make sense. It's like that's the job we've been given, that nobody else can do as well, because nobody else knows what we want and desire and feel the same way that we do. In fact, nobody really knows it anywhere near as much as we do. There's a nice song out, I might have mentioned it later, called Flowers, in which the woman who's just broken up with her boyfriend says, I started getting really sad when we broke up, and then I realized I can buy myself flowers, I can hold my own hand, and etc. I can love myself. And she even said, better than you can. And it's not an insult, it's not angry, it didn't feel like it. It was, one of the things she said was, I forgive everything you said. And it was kind of a triumphant thing of, I haven't lost love just because I've lost a relationship that was really passionate and joyful and seemed to offer so much at one point. I can still love myself better than anybody else can. So maybe self-love is really what this is all about. Self-love would be receiving the love of God, be recognizing our freedom, It would entail a lot of things. So I might just throw that out there as a wonder question. What for you, what would self-love look and feel like most? And I'll do the same. So we're going to go back a little bit in the text. I think we might finish up 7 today. Yeah, probably will. So we'll just go back a little bit in the text, and there's a paragraph that starts with "Stop wasting your energy trying to love God." And as you look for that paragraph, go ahead and bring your attention to your inhale 100%. Well, 98%. Use 2% to find the paragraph. But notice that I'm observing whatever's occurring without judgment. I notice I got a little bit of a headache. I'm sitting in the chair, sitting in the car seat. Kind of a glary gray day, yuck. I thought I might clean the windshield. Why don't we clean the windshield here? That'll make things a little bit clearer. And just 100% of attention on the inhale once you've found that paragraph, and the exhale. Let's do 3 breaths just to really get grounded. Really focusing attention on the breath. Welcoming whatever you're feeling, physically, emotionally. And even welcoming the thoughts that are going before the mind, passing in front of the mind like clouds. I'm not saying to believe them, I'm saying just welcome them. So, from the text, stop wasting your energy trying to love God. That won't do it for you. Stop wasting so much energy trying to learn how to love another. That won't do it for you. And for God's sake, please refrain from all attempts to get anyone to believe that you love them. End of paragraph. I'm just going to comment. Stop wasting. Learning how to love God or another won't do it for you. Isn't that fascinating? And continuing from the text. This is Joshua's recommendation, continuing from the text. Put the whole of your attention, like you just did with your breath, put your whole of your attention on giving up the patterns of belief from which you have attempted to crucify the self, capital S, he's talking about you. Put the whole of your attention on giving up the patterns of belief from which you have attempted to crucify the self that God made, the you that God made, and placed within you as your very awareness of your existence. So the self that God made and placed within you, he's talking about that thing which is the very awareness of your existence. And in the end, this probably defines us as well as anything. We are experiencing. We have awareness. So God made a self, capital S, and placed within you, that's interesting, as your very awareness of your existence. So put your whole attention on giving up the patterns of belief. Put your whole attention on giving up the beliefs which you're using to crucify the you that is you. So again, it seems so important. Put the whole of your attention on giving up the beliefs you're using to crucify yourself. Learn to love that self. Learn to love yourself beyond all created things. Wow. Learn to love that self beyond all created things. Learn to nurture that self. The direct, I'm going to interrupt the paragraph, direct guidance from Jeshua, from Jesus, on what we are actually meant to be doing. We're meant to be loving and nurturing ourselves. That awareness that we are, that God created. We're kind of given the main job. That's our main job. Nobody else can do it because nobody else knows what we know about ourselves. Learn to love that self beyond all created things. Learn to nurture that self. Learn to cultivate within that self only that which speaks of joy and truth, so that your words and your actions and your very presence always uplifts another, so that when another walks into the room in which you are sitting or standing or moving, they feel like a breath of fresh air has just hit them, even if you haven't lifted a finger. So it's interesting, under paragraph, so he's saying, don't try to get people to think you love them. Don't even try to learn how to love another or God. But cultivate within yourself that which speaks of joy and truth, so that your words and your actions and your presence always uplifts another. And it seems to me what he's talking about here is it's more like you'll know you're getting it when it's uplifting others. Yeah, I think it's not the goal per se to create being one who uplifts others. That's a side effect which is a good one, and which you can use to tell, hey, you're getting it. But the main goal here seems to be saying, love that self that God has made. You alone have the capacity to do it as well as you can do it. No one else can do it as well as you. Continuing, as long as there is a trace of energy within you in which you are striving to get from any perceived thing or object around you, what you are sure you lack inside yourself, you're trying to get something you think you lack inside yourself, you cannot know the love of self. And I'm going to interrupt that. As long as there's a trace of energy within you, a trace of energy, so any little impulse, in which you're striving to get from any perceived thing or object around you that you think you lack inside yourself. So you imagine you're lacking something inside yourself and you're trying to get that from outside of you. You can't know the love of yourself. It's because you're focusing on what you think you lack. And the truth is you don't lack anything. And so you're going down the wrong road. You're creating an illusory and therefore impossible task. It's completely useless to try to seek love from anything, only to recognize that the self that God has made, that awareness that you are, is actually made of and is the presence of love. Once you know that, you just extend it, as he's talking about, then your actions and your presence uplift others. He says if you seek outside yourself, you can't know the love of self, and you cannot experience freedom. Happiness is an inside job. So then what happens? You finally get it right, and you decide, okay, what's the little shadow been doing? Little blade of grass. Well, let's take care of that one and that one and that one and that one. How many blades of grass and how many shadows are there within this beingness that seems to be overlaid over the self? How many perceptions of something lacking that needs to be made up for in something outside the self? It's really how many ways are we not loving but judging or even hating the self? Let's bring our attention to that. How can we purify our relationship with ourselves so that we have nothing but love for ourselves? And he says, does it matter? You're birthing Christ. What happens when that really occurs? First and well, listen, nothing will be unacceptable to you. Well, does that mean if somebody is not a vegetarian that they're still loved? Does that mean if somebody votes for, what is this one, the man named after the bird, quail? If somebody were to vote for quail, why don't we substitute Biden? Why don't we substitute Trump? So we can each relate, everybody can sort of relate to that. Does that mean that they're not insane, that I can love them? Do you feel you can love someone who voted for Trump or who voted for Biden, depending on what your stripes are? Or whoever? Or does that mean that someone who seeks power and therefore creates a war and kills 5,000 women and children, that I can still look upon them and not have love be disturbed? We have real-world examples of that right now. People creating mass shootings. The Russians have gone into Ukraine and are engaging in extraordinary atrocities. Can I look upon them and not have my love be disturbed? Does it mean that whatever arises within this temporary world is really, truly, literally not a problem for me any longer, that nothing is unacceptable. Not the behavior of my kids, not the behavior of my spouse, not the behavior of my family, not the behavior of my country, not the behavior of other countries, not the behavior of those destroying the environment, none of it is unacceptable to me. It's all acceptable. Yes. It will become all acceptable. It doesn't mean you condone it. It means it's no longer unacceptable. For what you cannot accept, you will judge, and every judgment is the attempt to murder what you have decided has no right to be. So let's get really clear in that end of paragraph. Let's get really clear. It doesn't mean you condone it. In other words, you might see that there's a pattern of behavior which hasn't really evolved into a greater understanding yet. A great example for me is love your enemies. I mean, that was a crazy concept to the Romans. That was a crazy concept to many people. It still is a crazy concept to many people. They think it's crazy to love your enemies. But Jesus is saying, yeah, no, love your enemies because actually they're projections of yourself, and you need to learn to love yourself if you're going to be happy. So condoning it means thinking it's desirable that it continue. But that's very different from saying it shouldn't have happened. It's being open-minded to the idea that, well, I mean, maybe if God's creation is perfect, maybe it should have happened. But at the same time, we have the awareness of what brings pain. Self-hatred, hatred of others brings pain. We're not saying, oh, we condone, we think it's a good idea to continue hating. It's more like, oh, well, let's look at, maybe it's the perfect learning lesson to learn that you don't want to be hateful anymore. So we're not saying it shouldn't have happened. That's what judgment would be. But at the same time, we're not saying, oh, this is a really good idea to continue with. We're learning to choose anew. At times we want to choose anew. So yes, it doesn't mean you condone it. It means it's no longer unacceptable. For what you cannot accept, you will judge. And every judgment is the attempt to murder what you have decided has no right to be. Next paragraph is really important. Judgment is the opposite of forgiveness. It lives on the side of the fence with fear. Forgiveness lies on the fence with love. And only love can heal the world. Imagine then living in a state of beingness in which literally nothing was unacceptable to you, because you knew that the source of your true beingness was far beyond the limitations of anything created in space and time. That even death, which has been created out of the contraction known as fear, that not even death is unacceptable. End of paragraph. We're doing some micro-mining on these paragraphs because they're so important. He talks about forgiveness earlier. He gives a tremendous definition of it. Forgiveness, I don't remember the exact wording, but it's forgiveness is the forgiving of self for projecting on others what they couldn't have done. Oh, here it is. For you see, to forgive means to choose to release another from the perceptions that you've been projecting upon them. It is therefore an act of forgiving oneself of one's projections. So forgiveness is an act of forgiving oneself of one's projections. It says here, judgment is the opposite of forgiveness. But there isn't given, for whatever reason, a definition of judgment. It is given other places in the pathway, but so I just want to insert this idea of how you might think of judgment. Judgment is not discernment. It's not saying the sky is blue, that's a rock, that's a telephone pole, it's raining today. Judgment is the resolute belief that something should have been or should be different from the way it is. So I always use the word should to identify the error in my thinking that is occurring that is called judgment. There's an exercise where he tells us to burn a paper with should and ought and so on. Yeah, but you can utilize those words to find out where you're thinking erroneously. That's a really good skill. So judgment, I define judgment as the resolute belief that something should be different or should have been different. Someone's behavior 20 minutes ago, for example, or some condition that's existing now. Do you think it would be better, or it would be better? It would be better, or more moral, or more whatever, if it were different. That's a judgment, so that's pretty big. So if we're going to heal our minds and forgive and bring, well, what did he say? To get rid of all of the obstacles, of all of the patterns of belief which you're using to attempt to crucify yourself, the thing that you need to look at is your judgments. Those are the patterns of belief you're using to crucify yourself. The judgments that you're allowing to live in your mind. The belief that something should be different from the way it is, or should have been different. Jack should have come to the party last week and he didn't. Or my spouse shouldn't be so abusive, even though they are. Or there should be more money in the bank account, even though there isn't. Or, there shouldn't be a war, even though there is. If you wish to truly love the self that God created, you're going to have to look and find and be willing to reconsider and heal every judgment that's living in your mind. Judgment is the opposite of forgiveness. Forgiveness is always justified. And wherever, he's implying here, whenever we're judging, we're actually projecting and haven't healed our minds of the projections that live within us and are occurring as a result of things that haven't been forgiven in the self. Okay, back to the paragraph. Judgment is the opposite of forgiveness. It lives on the side of the fence with fear. Forgiveness lives on the side of the fence with love. And only love can heal this world. Imagine then living in a state of beingness in which literally nothing was unacceptable to you, because you knew that the source of your true beingness was far beyond the limitations of anything created in space and time. That even death, which has been created out of the contraction known as fear, that not even death is unacceptable. In a paragraph here, he's defining death. It says, so it's been created out of it's been created. Death has been created out of the contraction known as fear. So our experience of death, which is an illusion also, because we don't die. We go with the life of our spiritual self is uninterrupted, as it were, whether we're associating with a body or not. So even the experience of death, it's not that death has been created, it's the experience of believing in death and experiencing something which can't occur. That's been created out of fear that we've created. So nice creating you all, us all. This is how extraordinary the child of God's creative capacity truly are. Let's go back to the text. When I spoke many months ago to this my beloved brother, who allows me to blend with his mind, and I said to him, if you will choose to trust me, I will show you the way to peace. I had to wait for his reply. I could do nothing to take from him the freedom required to become wholly committed to allowing Christ to be birthed where once a useless illusion had reigned. And when I said to him, in your understanding of time, quite some time ago, I will show you how to become the being out of which all of creation is arising, so that you will know the truth that sets you free, it raised up within him the most root or fundamental of fears possible. And what is that? It is the last to be overcome, the fear of death. For when you are confronted by the truth, you know that everything you have sought to create as a substitute for the truth must die. That is why it is said, the last to be overcome shall be death, fear of death. Death is allowed that Christ might live. Continuing on, there is no one in this room, listen carefully, there is no one in this room, and there shall be not at any time be anyone who hears these words, to whom I have not spoken that promise unto. I will show you the way to truth that is true always and sets you free. But only you can make the decision to bring the whole of your being into that journey. And all it requires is this much willingness, what you call a smidgen in your world. A smidgen of willingness is all it takes. I know the way home because I have completed the journey, and I will show you that way. With every word I utter, in this form as well as in other forms, my one intent is to reveal the place within Reveal the place that within you to yourself that is the presence of the love that you seek. I am going to end there. We're not going to finish 7 today. I was wrong. What do you know? That's a first. Not really. So, and again, just beautiful material. I just feel such an immersion into this that I'll have to say, I don't feel I've felt it in my bones quite the same way. That what we're really supposed to be doing is loving the self that God made, that we are. And in order to do that, I think he's saying this in several different ways in several different chapters. In order to do that, we have to become so divinely selfish that we don't allow any judgmental thoughts to live in our minds. So the question might be, that's so interesting like that. I don't want that thing in my life. I don't want it to be rainy and kind of yucky today. Well, do I have a judgment about that? People, I do sessions with people, and people will say, well, blah, 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 blah. And I'll say, okay, it sounds like it's true that, someone robbed all your money from the bank account and your wife ran off with your banker and your kids won't talk to you anymore. And they'll go, yes, it's true. And then I'll go, cool, that's great. Are you cool with that? And they'll go, well, no. And that's kind of where the work's done. It's like, okay, can you frame a statement that puts it into a should? Well, the banker that ran off with my wife shouldn't have taken all my money. And there'll be a resolute feeling of that's true and that there's reason to complain and that life should be different. But this is where a higher self-love kicks in, which is that if we judge even something like that, if we judge it, we're actually crucifying ourselves. It's not the event that does it, it's the self-judgment that we let live in our minds that does it. That's what's crucifying us. Judgment. So it's always this looking for, unloving thoughts are creating my unloving experience. As the Course would say, Course in Miracles, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. In the Way of Mastery, I must be so divinely selfish as to not let a single judgmental thought live in my mind. Which implies that the opposite of the judgment might be true. Oh, that's so interesting. How is it that perhaps the banker should have run off with my wife and taken all my money? Isn't that interesting? Because if that's what happened, no matter what it was, you're better off if it should have. Again, because then you're not fighting reality. So, to love ourselves, stop fighting reality. And consider the possibility that everything that's occurring may actually be occurring in alignment with, let's say, one will, which is not conflicted and not fighting against other wills. And we all share that will when we understand what it is. The will is love extending itself. And the will is journeys away from love being interrupted so that we might reconsider and to really love our enemies. And if you can see where I'm getting with this, well, what becomes our enemy if that's the case? What do we need to love most? It's not the banker, it's not the spouse, it's not the whatever. It's actually what we need to love are the judgments that we're making. So we need to look at them and reconsider them and not judge that we're judging. We say, oh yeah, I'm judging. I'm thinking they shouldn't have done that. It was cruel and horrible. And then you can look at it again and you say, well, maybe I should love my judgment and think maybe it's diametrically wrong. Maybe they should have run off and done whatever. You understand, I'm just making up something. Maybe the guy should have stolen my stereo in chapter 3. And then we're not, as Byron Katie would say, fighting with reality. And it may be that our fight with reality is the least loving thing we can do for ourselves. That we find a deeper, an actual truth that we find that's deeper when we start getting keyed into the awareness of an all-loving universe. To consider that truly seems like a very self-loving thing to do. This is David Chalk, on a rainy day in Rhode Island, sending all of you my wishes for your well-being. We'll talk again.